So this is the watercolor wash demonstration. Here you can see what it can be good for. It's really a background where you use lines going across, just like this, to create a fade of some kind to use somehow later on. This is one example that a student of mine did last year. You can see this wonderful fade. It can either be a solid color or it can be a fade going lighter. You can even make color to white to another color. That's a little bit more complicated. We're going to look at the first two today. How do you make a smooth background that doesn't show any streaks? Well, you need gravity. So let me show you my setup. I've got a clipboard here and I've got something behind it, this little first aid kit, as a way to raise it up a few inches off of the table. And then I've got my paper all ready to go, clipped in. I've also got some color already mixed. So here I decided to go for this orange color. I put a little bit of purple and blue to take off the intensity, so it won't be so bright of an orange. And I've got some extra water. This is to get lighter as you go down. I've also got a brush that can hold a lot of watercolor. So I mentioned I pre-mixed my color. What I'm going to do first is with my damp brush, I'm just going to fill it, totally saturate this as full of color as I can. Then I'm going to go in a straight line across. I'm going to look for extra paint, like it's almost going to drip. And actually, if it drips as you're practicing, that's okay. It's better that it drips than it's too dry. Otherwise, you get the dry brush effect. It'll set a stain on the paper and you won't get it that smooth effect that we're aiming for. So the wash has got to be smooth. So if anything, dripping is okay. Eventually I'll go for it, not doing that, but sometimes in my examples, I'll even accidentally let a little bit of paint drip, but we can roll with it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paint straight across, letting gravity take it down. See where it's extra dark? I'm going to overlap now. My strokes are overlapping about halfway. I'm looking to see that that paint continues, that extra dark band on the bottom. Now, when I start running out of paint, which is going to be pretty soon, I'm going to start to just lightly dip my brush in water. What that's going to do is it's going to change the ratio of the watercolor in my brush, so it'll be lighter. I'm not going to wash out my brush. I'm simply going to touch it to the water to change how intense that color is, how true that color is. So here's my water, just a touch, and you can see a little bit of that paint is on the water now. You won't see too much in my brush yet, or on the paper yet, but as I work these lines, slowly going farther and farther down, you'll see they're slowly getting lighter and lighter. I'm going to dunk a little bit more. This changes the ratio again. See how it's getting lighter and lighter? I'm still overlapping halfway. I have to time this just right. If I go too fast, it doesn't allow enough time for that paint to go down the paper. If I go too slowly, the color will set in the page and I'll get streaks. Again, the goal is to be as smooth as possible. Once I start getting near the base, I can use a paper towel, or I can squeeze my brush just like between my fingers here, just like that, and I will be able to get rid of some of that color. I'll make my brush a thirsty brush. So here I'm getting rid of the last bit, and you see how smooth that is? It's because of gravity. Sometimes students will make it flat. This would be flat, but I'd say at least prop it up a few inches. 6 centimeters? I'm more familiar with inches, but prop it up a little bit so that gravity takes it down level by level. Once you've done that, and once it's dried, then you can sketch on top of it. Here, I saw the orange sky and I thought, what can I do with an orange sky? And I thought, how about Mars? How about a Mars rover? So I looked up a picture of a Mars rover, and here you can see I started to sketch it. Now, if you're familiar with two-point perspective, you can see how I simplified it. I mean, it has all these instruments all over the place, but you can see this is my closest edge, just like here's the closest edge on that camera top. And then it gets smaller to one side and smaller to the other, as if I've got vanishing points. I don't actually have vanishing points, but I've got the idea behind it, which is why it's so helpful to know about perspective. But here I sketched on top of it. The great thing about this too, if I erase lightly, I can actually take off a lot of this pencil. So it's a great way of drawing on top of this, going in layers. And when I, again, have that background dry, I can pull out some more color, like a gray that I've pre-mixed. And with this gray, you can see my really old palette here. I want to show my students you can do a lot with old stuff. You don't have to have the fanciest, newest thing. Zoom in here, and taking a look at that picture, I'm just going to lightly paint over some of this, a grayish, brownish color. I want something neutral. Maybe if it's too light. Show up. I want to get something that's kind of neutral. This light brown would be okay. It'd be like it's reflecting some of the surface, right? Some of that ambient color makes it on top of the gray. What I really like about these brushes is they've got a really nice fine tip. So you can get into some small spaces. Yeah, I just want a really light color. That's going to dry slightly darker. But these brushes also hold a lot of color too, so it just gives you a lot of options. I'm going to just add a little bit more of the wheels. And see how that is when I dry it. When it dries, you can see since the background is already dried, I can just layer on top of this. And once that dries, I can layer again. It's kind of like stained glass. You know, the more layers you have, the darker generally it's going to go. But you're going to see those different layers. So the lower colors matter. Okay. Well, I can just keep going with this, but I think you get the point. You can paint on top, especially if you have a good sketch below. The wash is an excellent way of connecting your piece. Without something like a wash in the background, it seems too disconnected. It doesn't seem cohesive. And so this is an excellent solution of bringing your paintings together. It just takes a little bit of prep and some preparation and some thought ahead of time and some planning. But here's an example of the wash and how you can use it.